Welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen. And hey, with World Dairy Expo right around the corner, I am chatting today with a special guest from the dairy industry down under, an Australian dairy farmer's daughter with a professional career in news journalism, who will be combining these two passions to bring you in-the-moment coverage of showring champions, elite breeders, and renowned exhibitors as the voice and face of Cosmo on Cue. Live expo coverage brought to you from our friends at Cowsmo Publications. Let's get to know Casey Treloar and her inspiring story of how saying yes and figuring out the rest has opened doors to work with great cows and great people around the world. And if you're heading to World Dairy Expo in Madison next week, I hope to see you there. You can join me on Monday for the National Dairy Shrine's Young Professionals Luncheon from noon to 2 p.m., featuring a career panel with 3 well-respected industry professionals and friends of mine, including Kylene Anderson, editor of Horde's Dairymen, Brian Coyne from Select Sires, and Amanda Lichtensteger from Diamond V. Also, on Thursday morning, grab a seat in the Tanbark from 8 to 10 a.m., where we are chatting with dairymen Matt Strickland and Jay Haig and their nutritionists Kelly Hutchinson and Jody Erickson on the novel topic of no-feed VMS milking systems, sponsored by DeLaval. There's links in the show notes for these events. And hey, if we cross paths in Madison next week, please stop and say hello. I'd love to connect with you while we're there. And now let's hear from Casey Treloar.
Peggy, it's an absolute honor to jump on the Uplevel podcast. I've heard of the podcast and the work that you're doing, and obviously now the collaboration with Cowsmo Publications as well. So I'm super excited to be back in the States and promoting all things dairy industry and showing the best cattle in the world.
As you say that, Casey, we got to just dig in for a moment to a little bit of your background, because you are a news journalist in Australia, but you have the heart of a dairy farmer. And so tell me a little bit about those two worlds and how they collide.
Well, I grew up on a dairy farm, so naturally that's where my heart is and I guess my passion is. I had the opportunity to be surrounded by the registered cattle industry in the world of breeding Holsteins. I got into the world of showing and promoting and marketing cattle and started traveling to shows right around Australia. And I loved that side of things. I mean, to be honest, the dream as a kid was to be a vet, or in Australia, we refer to them as largies. So you deal with the large animals and the cows. And that's, obviously the industry I wanted to be surrounded by. But then being surrounded by the show industry and the connections that you make and the people that you meet, and I was sort of opened up to the world of media and how that connects people as well. And I thought, well, maybe that's something that is maybe more aligned to what I want to do. So I went to college or university in Australia and studied media and journalism, and I work in the television industry now, and that was never the goal that I set out to do. But no, I'm very privileged and lucky to work with one of the biggest television networks in Australia, 7 News. It's a national network, but I work in our state bureau in my hometown city of Adelaide. So yeah, it's been tremendous to work on that career and exceed there, I guess. But then now to be able to tap into my passion, that is the dairy industry, and to collide my television career with that, I could never have dreamt it up.
Aw, you are living the dream. So you grew up on a dairy farm, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I grew up on what was quite a large dairy farm back then. We were milking 700 cows. Sadly, we don't have the family farm anymore. In Australia, the dairy industry has been really the last 20 years, it's been a really tough industry to be in. And there's a lot of factors at play, like drought, and the cost of running a dairy farm just sort of went through the roof. And so we had a combination of factors, which meant, sadly, we had to say goodbye to the family farm. But I was determined for that not to be the end. So we're super lucky that my dad and we got to keep some of our favorite cows and continue to breed from them and take them to shows right around Australia. And there's potentially plans to try and get some of those genetics over here in North America, but we'll see.
Oh, how exciting. That sounds like a teaser for things to come. But Casey, as you share that story, I think it is very relative to so many of us in the U.S. dairy industry too, and even my own background growing up on a family dairy farm and having that experience of mom and dad selling the cows 5 or 6 years ago. It's difficult because it's so close to your heart and so close to your heritage and your roots. And really, you in your role in news, you talked about staying close on the genetic side, but you also really advocate for Australian dairy farmers within your own country too, don't you?
Yeah, look, as sad as it was to say farewell to the family farm, obviously I was working in television at the time in what we call regional or country news. So I hadn't sort of tapped into the big city news just at that point. But I saw an opportunity. My parents, I guess they wanted to be, it was hard for them. Like, this is the life that they built, the farm that they built, the legacy they tried to build, and they had to say farewell to it. So they wanted to go through it a little, I guess, privately in a sense. But I sort of thought, oh, well, maybe if I go public with it and I share our story just to give a bit of an insight to what our dairy farmers were going through at the time. The value of the dairy product was so devalued in Australia at the time. And I sort of wanted to share the impacts that was having. And so, yeah, I decided to share a little video on Facebook and it went a little viral. In my mind, I just wanted it to be shared amongst friends and family, just to give them a perspective of what was going on, and put it to Facebook at about 6 o'clock at night, local time. And by the next morning, it had already had tens of, maybe hundreds of thousands of views at that time. And we were getting phone calls from local media, national media, you name it. And for weeks and it was in the middle of a federal election. So our big national election in Australia. So I ended up being invited to the capital in Australia, Canberra, and I got to meet with both agricultural leaders at the time, the opposition leader at the time as well, and really share the plight that was going on. And it put the topic of the dairy industry back in the spotlight. And as a result, sort of weeks later, there was lots of conversations happening around processors and how they were looking after farmers, or maybe not looking after farmers, probably to the best of their ability when it came to milk contracts and things. We've got two major supermarkets. It's sort of a duopoly, and as a result, they have majority of the market power when it comes to selling produce and things. And part of I mentioned the devaluation of the product. They were selling milk for $1 a litre in Australia at the time. But in the weeks following that video going viral, it got those processors and it got those supermarkets and the pressure going. And that was the end of $1 a litre milk. And that was fantastic to see, to see that these major corporations were suddenly going, okay, we've messed up here. We've done the dirty on the dairy industry. And yeah, to see that change and to see consumers, I think that was my biggest message, was to consumers to buy local and support local dairy producers and processors that were looking after the dairy farmers and actually paying them as well. And that campaign was incredible to see.
We talk about the power of social media. Your voice and the effort and the heart that you put into sharing a message literally changed the industry in your community. And when I say community, I'm speaking for Australian dairy farming community. And so for someone that hasn't seen that video, give us the quick recap. What were a few of the specific talking points that you feel really, really connected with consumer and that were the stepping stones towards this bigger impact, effort, and true change?
I guess the video, gosh, now it's probably 7 years ago now. However, we have now seen in the world of social media a lot more farmers and young people really come forward with their own stories and messages too. And I think that was really important to highlight, that us as young future generations in this industry, like, we have a voice and people will listen to us. For those that haven't had a connection to cows or met cows, when you see people meet a cow for the first time, it is really, really magical. And I suppose I've been very privileged to have that connection growing up, and I guess I wanted to tap into that and what that meant to me in that video as well. I panned around in the paddock at the time when I was filming the video, and some of my favorite cows, and the thought of having to say goodbye to them and to have them so devalued to a point where they might not even have a future in a dairy herd. They might just end up at the abattoir. But these are animals that I'd developed, that they'd had champions at our local shows. One had a world title for her breed. The tragedy of having to say farewell to something like that. So that was, I guess, sort of my opening. And I guess getting emotional wasn't necessarily part of the plan, but you can't help it. If it's an industry that you love and you're trying to share a message with people, yeah, that emotion cut through. And I think that's what really connected to people. And I don't like to always play the gender card, but the image of the Australian dairy farmer, I mean, the average age of a farmer in Australia is well over 50, even 60 years of age. So to see a young female sort of share just how passionate they are about the industry, I think that was a turning point for some people because they hadn't heard that voice before. But then, yeah, you mentioned the messages. So I had some key messages to talk about the devaluation of the product and how $1 a litre milk was hurting the dairy industry, the pressures of the drought at the time and the dry times. Australia is known as a country of the land of drought and flooding rains. In the last 12 months, that couldn't be more true. Where I'm from in South Australia, many parts of the state have recorded the driest season on record, so some of the worst drought conditions. But meanwhile, on the East Coast, where there's a lot of dairy farmers there too, they've recorded one of the wettest seasons ever, to the point where entire farms were completely flooded underwater, and we lost cows to literally drowning. So we've got literally two extreme polar opposites in Australia. So highlighting, I guess, the harsh conditions that we were dealing with too, but also the cost of doing so in terms of feed bills and paying for workers and electricity and all of those things were compounding, and basically the cost of production versus what farmers were being paid, it just got to the point of being unsustainable. And I just sort of wanted to share, I mean, I'm not big on economics, but I just wanted to share a little bit of what that meant for dairy farmers and why so badly they needed more support.
And I think what you just said there, maybe not big on economics, but heavy on heart, and numbers don't connect the way that true passion and emotion does. And that made all the difference, and your voice being one that spoke on behalf of your family, your friends, your community, and the whole industry at the end of the day. And so you talk, Casey, about some of the challenges that come up with dairy farming in Australia. And I'm going to ask you to speak on behalf of your community of dairy in Australia today. You mentioned some of the excessive flooding or extreme drought. But as of today, 7 years later, after your voice was profoundly heard around the world, what is it like to be an Australian dairy farmer?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's gotten any easier, but certainly, I mean, in Australia, a majority of cows live outside and in paddocks and things like that. So while there has been, since in those 7 years, some really, really good times, it hasn't always been drought and flooding rains, but in the good times, dairy farmers have genuinely been able to start reinvesting back in their farm. And that's been incredible to see. We've seen farms right around the country starting to invest in the robot systems, in the barn systems. I'm a huge advocate for cows being able to live in barns and being housed indoors. I mean, I lived here in the States for 12 months and I saw firsthand the welfare and the care that you can provide to animals. I mean, the access into that sort of technology has been incredible. But to see the Australian dairy industry finally be able to tap into the technology side of things, so whether it's the collars on the cows to read for rumination and health traits and fertility, but then also now to be able to invest in infrastructure has just been amazing. So while it's been pretty tough in the last 12 months, a lot of farmers are trying to, I guess they're going to be in a catch-up mode for at least the next 18 months to maybe 2 years. But because of the good times previously, they have been able to start this investment. But also that investment means it's they're securing those farms for the future. So that means that next generation will now suddenly, they've got the foundation to be able to keep going.
And so with those investments, it sounds like they're being made in controlling some of those variables a little bit more, from bringing cows into housing rather than being subjected to some of those extremes in the environment in Australia, and the technologies that you saw when you were here in the US being implemented more widespread in Australia. But tell me about your 12 months in the US. Where were you and what were you doing here?
I feel like I've come full circle. I'm sitting here in Chicago, and I lived an hour south of here at a farm many people would know as Uplevel Farm. I got an internship there and had the tremendous opportunity to work with the team there and travel a bit of the country. I had a marketing role where I helped sort of promote the genetics. And I mean, I explained to non-dairy people that Uplevel Farm wasn't a farm that produced milk, it produced genetics and embryos. And that was sort of my role there. And that was incredible when I got to travel to obviously World Dairy Expo, and I'd been there already previously too, and the Royal Winter Fair and several other shows too. So that opportunity was just incredible. And so I spent 10 months there on the farm, but then I was obviously in the middle of my university studies at the time, and so managed to get an internship in Manhattan. So got to live in New York for 2 months as well, and finish that off and work in the financial district. And it was a whirlwind of a year. But look, for anyone that wants to broaden their horizons, traveling abroad and living and working elsewhere, I couldn't recommend it more highly.
Oh, what an incredible experience. So you had the dairy experience at Butler View and the marketing and the high-end genetics, and then you finished out your 12 months here in the US in Manhattan, like living that life. Okay, those are like two extremes.
Going from a dairy farm to it's really quite a small town in Chaban's, an hour south of Chicago, to living in the big city in New York. But look, the two experiences, I guess, at the end of the day, shaped me and where I am today. So it meant that when I got home back to Australia, people sort of looked on my resume, what I'd been doing the last 12 months, and suddenly internships started popping up, and the next opportunity led to the other, and that's where I am now.
Ooh, okay. So I want to just challenge you for a minute here, Casey, to speak to the young people that are in that stage of their life, maybe that 20 to 23 years old, at that prime point in life to be able to go do those things. What is your message to those individuals that are at that pivotal point in their personal lives and careers in the dairy industry?
I think the biggest thing for me when it came to career progression and really starting at that point when that opportunity in the US came up, be a yes man. If you get offered an opportunity and you go, well, I can't make that work, just say yes and work out the details later. Applying for the whole visa process was very tiresome, and it took a lot of effort, and it's not easy, but say yes and work out the rest later. And it's been so rewarding to, obviously with the connections that I have here in the US, there's young people in Australia that they want they want similar opportunities, and it's been so amazing to connect them with people here in the US. I'm actually about to see, there's a young friend of mine, she's in her 20s, and I got her a job in Wisconsin at an incredible farm by the name of Bud John, and I'm actually going up to see them this week, which I'm so excited. But that was an opportunity where she didn't necessarily have the confidence or the know-how to be able to reach out to those people. I just said, just say yes, accept the job, and then you can work out the rest later. So if you have those opportunities to go abroad, meet new people, the connections you make will set you up for life. As a result to saying yes to moving to the US, I mean, I was a young, naive, 22 at the time, a young female in this industry. Look, I probably didn't necessarily make the most of those opportunities. I was so young and I guess inexperienced at the time, but because I did that, I made the connections. And as a result, here I am now, 10 years later, flying back to the US year after year to report on the biggest cow show in the world. It's just incredible.
I love that motto that you just shared. Say yes and figure out the rest. Highly quotable right there. And not just for the young folks, but for some of us more seasoned as well.
And it's something that I've taken on, when I moved back to Australia and I finished my studies and I started getting jobs in journalism, where I am, I've been with 7 News now for coming up 7 years. But prior to that, I didn't hold a job for longer than 6 months. And that's not because I was losing my job. It's because these next opportunities just kept coming along. And I said yes, and I worked out the rest later. I mean, the job I had beforehand, I was there for 1 week when I got another job opportunity come along. And I thought, oh, gosh, I've just moved to this new state. And so 3 weeks in, the official job offer came through. And so 4 weeks into this brand new job, I had to give my 4 weeks notice. But had I not made that decision then, I wouldn't have the career that I do today. So you really do, when those next opportunities come along, you need to be the yes man, because you don't know what doors you might be closing down the track.
And speaking of saying yes and doors that will come open, you've had a door that has come open for you that brings you back to the US for World Dairy Expo. And you were here last year. You are back again. Tell me about Cosmo on Q.
This has been a project that has been so incredible to see come to life. So it really started back in Australia at our major show there, International Dairy Week. I know the owners quite well, and he's actually helped me a lot with my career over the years. But together we sort of came up with this idea of doing these interviews at the show and maybe recording them and putting them on Facebook and capturing a moment in a cow show that hasn't been done before. So the moment that cow has been tapped champion, we're interviewing that exhibitor straight away. And that emotion is so raw, especially when there's really unique stories that come out of it. So we started that in Australia. Goodness me, that was about 3 or 4 years ago. And when COVID started disappearing and international visitors started coming back to the show, people sort of started seeing the work we were doing. And then suddenly people all over the world were able to essentially feel like they were at International Dairy Week in Australia. And a lot of international people have traveled there. So for them to be able to hear from the breeders and exhibitors that were doing well and having success there, they felt like they could be at the show, and they felt like they were hearing from their friends and people that they'd made connections with about what was happening at that time. So as a result, a lot of international people and judges were coming to Australia and listening to and seeing what we were doing there with these live interviews. And a lot of people were making passing comments. Oh, you should come to World Dairy Expo and do it there. And in my head, I was like, that sounds great, but someone's got to pay for it. Anyhow, in the turn of events, I mean, Cosmopolitan does travel to International Dairy Week and provide coverage there. So we got the conversation going, and the right conversations started happening. And as a result, 2024 was my first year to travel to World Dairy Expo and bring that product, bring those interviews and that access to the show that hasn't been seen before for the first time. And the response to that was just incredible. I mean, Cowsmo on cue, it really took off in its first year. And for me, a part of me was like, oh, I'm just this girl from Australia. Like, why are people from North America going to listen to the product that I'm producing? But because so many people had seen what we were doing in Australia, they were very familiar with what I was then doing at World Dairy Expo. So these people and these breeders that I'd looked up to and, just thought of, I guess, the celebrities in the cow world, now suddenly I'm interviewing them and they know who I am and what I'm doing. That was just incredible. So the feedback was phenomenal. People were saying during the week last year, they said, oh, you have to come back and do it again next year. And I was like, well, this is just the start. Let's see how we go for year one. But no, here we are, year two. I'm coming back 2025 World Dairy Expo to bring Cowsmo on cue again. And I couldn't be more excited.
Oh, and you are already here in the U.S., in Chicago right now. And we are just a couple of days away from the big event of World Dairy Expo, and also this special project, Cosmo on Q. And so, so you talked about the goal of this work is really just to bring people into the moment, into one of the most precious, truly like precious moments to the dairy exhibitor and to the dairy producer. And that's the win. That is the highest point right after the win, the excitement, the goal. And that's when you get to step in and you get to share that with people around the world. And what an incredible opportunity that you've had to be in these conversations. And you've had them with a lot of people between your work in Australia and now 2024 World Dairy Expo, gearing up for 2025. But I got to ask you, if you had to pick just one conversation that you've had doing these segments that has just really, really had the most power and meaning to you personally, which one would it be?
An interview I will never forget, whether it exists online anymore or not, is with someone that people in North America, many people will be very familiar with, and that is the late Matt Templeton. Matt was one of the greatest breeders that had ever bred cows in Australia. He was a highly acclaimed judge, not just in Australia, but he traveled a lot to North America. He judged a lot of incredible shows here. In fact, he was an associate judge at World Dairy Expo as well. But sadly, Matt Templeton, he was diagnosed with cancer several years ago and lost that battle earlier this year. But it was International Dairy Week this year at 2025 in January, and Matt and his wife Nicola and their team, they brought a tremendous team of cattle that did so well, won many classes. And to see Matt in the ring, for so many people, it was so powerful because it was his sheer love and determination. You could see it on his face when he was leading these cows. And it was at a point in his battle where strength wasn't there, but his heart was, and you could see that in the ring. And Matt also had the opportunity to judge the International Jersey show there as well. So I had the opportunity to interview Matt a few times over the years, but it was that interview after judging the Jersey show. And Matt was just incredible in terms of mentoring youth and young people. As a side story, Matt taught me how to put fake tails on a cow, I want to say about 15 years ago. I mean, he loved teaching young people the tricks of the trade as a fitter. He was one of the best fitters in the world. And he taught me how to fit these tails. And the messages that he shared, I will never forget the quote he said in that interview: if you're standing still, you're not moving forward. And that might sound so simple, but the way he delivered those words just hit me right here. And I think it hit a lot of other people as well. And it's so true. Matt is someone, he was never sitting still. He was always moving forward. He was always looking at that next sale, that next cow to develop, that next show, that next opportunity to travel overseas and judge that next show. And gosh, if I could go back and interview Matt again, I would, just to get those, bits of experience. But yeah, Matt was an absolute legend in the industry in Australia, and he was very well known here in North America too. And it was an honor and a privilege, and it wasn't lost on me just how important it was to be able to share his message and that interview too.
And because you shared his message, because you had that conversation, so many other people, more than you will ever know, Casey, got to take those words and put them in their hearts too. And so I got to ask, when you did that interview, did you have an instinct that it would be the last one?
Well, no, I don't think any of us truly knew at that time just how long Matt would have. Maybe in the back of my mind, I did at the time, and I knew how important that interview was going to be. But I just feel so honored that we were able to share that interview at that time. And now knowing that was one of his last makes it all the more special.
What a great story to share. And as you think about what's coming up in a few days here, what are you most looking forward to at World Dairy Expo this year?
Oh, golly. I think, again, just sharing those stories and moments of emotion. I'll never forget, it was one of my first interviews I did at World Dairy Expo last year. And it was this young lad, Tyler, who just won the overall showmanship champion. And as a young lad that I'm sure he probably never hoped to show this sort of emotion he did. But it just hit him just how monumental it was for him to win that showmanship award at World Dairy Expo, and for him to show that raw emotion in that interview with me. I mean, he didn't know me from a bar of soap, but he felt comfortable and happy and elated and so emotional at the time that he was willing to share that with us and in that interview too. So I just hope I can share some of those really special moments for people and breeders and exhibitors that will get to experience tapping into that emotion and for the world to be able to see that too. I just hope people are able to watch along and enjoy what we produce.
And everything from the icons of the show ring down to those that are in their very early stages of being that person 20 years from now with those youth. What a great place to be, and what a cool spot that you said yes to. And I'm going to go back to what you shared earlier, Casey. Say yes and figure out the rest. I love that motto, and it seems so true to who you are and the road that has brought you from growing up on a dairy farm in Australia, going through some challenging times as a dairy farm family, pursuing your career in reporting and journalism. And now, because of your yeses, you get to bring it all together in Madison this week to do what you love. Share the voices, share the stories, share the moments, and to do it with the heart of a dairy girl. And I love it so much, Casey. So where can people find you if someone's at World Dairy Expo and they want to wave or say hi to you? Where will they find you?
Oh my goodness, I'm going to be here, there, and everywhere. I mean, a big part of my research is obviously watching the show and seeing the animals come in. And obviously, I've done a bit of research prior of shows that some cows have already done well at, and obviously the big sale animals from the last 6 to 12 months as well. So it's going to be really fascinating seeing which cows walk through the ring and which cows maybe don't, and seeing obviously some of the big names and who's coming up against who. I mean, it was so thrilling last year to see that battle between Footloose and Shakira. I mean, you could hear a pin drop in that Coliseum when those cows were coming in the ring, and there were other big name cows in that class too. And oh, I just look forward to those sorts of moments. But in terms of where you'll find me, I'll either be ringside doing my research, or I will be pounding the pavement in the barns, meeting people, saying hi to old friends as well. But we'll be doing the interviews here, there, and everywhere. So I'll be running around with my microphone at the ready.
And you will be in your happy place, won't you?
Oh, I will be in my happy place. So, absolutely. I mean, seeing some of the best cows in the world again, meeting and talking and networking with these breeders and these exhibitors again as well. Oh my gosh, I'm just so excited.
Okay, so for those that aren't at World Dairy Expo and would like to catch up on these interviews that you're doing, be in the moment with you ringside and talking with those as they have some of their highest goals achieved, where can they watch that and tune in?
Absolutely. So on Cowsmo Facebook page, we will be posting the videos there. I mentioned again that Facebook has these new settings where they delete their live video. So we might be readjusting in terms of, literally just worked that out today. We might need to readjust our plan in terms of how we post those videos to make sure that we don't lose them as well. But yes, on the Cosmopolitan Facebook page, I'll also be behind the scenes working on some social media projects as well, you know, doing reels and all the viral things that we hope to try and project out there from the world's biggest show.
So lots to look forward to in the week ahead. And before I let you go today, Casey, I'm going to put one more question out to you. Who is your dream guest? Who is the person that you have not spoken to yet, but like is your dream interview?
I've been so privileged to have interviewed some of the biggest names in this industry, and I'm sure there's many more of those interviews to come. But yeah, look, goodness me. No, I'm going to have to take that question on notice. I don't know yet.
I think what this means is we need a follow-up.
Right? Yeah. Let's lock that in. I like that idea.
Well, all right. Any final words, Casey, for our folks out there that are listening, those that are looking forward to being at World Dairy Expo with you, and to those that are looking forward to tuning in from wherever they are around the world?
At the end of the day, this is younger Casey's dream. I literally, when I decided to study journalism at university, I thought to myself, well, if I can tap into writing and my love for the dairy industry, I'd love to be able to travel the world and report on the biggest cow shows. And here we are, we're doing that a second year running. It is not lost on me the responsibility that I have with this role as well. I mean, we've got some important stories to tell, some really valuable lessons to be shared as well that we have been able to do so already. But no, I'm just so excited for everyone to tune in. I hope all the guests are comfortable and happy to share their thoughts and their emotions with me again as well. But we're so excited to have everyone tap in again. And I really want to thank the Cosmopolitan team for investing in me again and bringing me back over here, because this opportunity is just incredible. And I keep saying I'm honored and privileged, but those words couldn't ring any more true. It's just the biggest opportunity in the world, and I cannot wait to be ringside and back at the biggest and best dairy show in the world.
Well, I'm looking forward to hopefully crossing paths with you there as you are running in between the barns and the show ring, and I will be running in between interviews and events and everything else. So hopefully we'll get a chance to at least cross paths, if nothing else, a quick hug, and just know that cheering you on as you live out your dream this year at World Dairy Expo, Casey.
Thank you so much, Peggy. It's been so great to be on the Uplevel podcast, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you there next week.
And there you have it, friends. Casey Treloar coming all the way from Australia to Madison, Wisconsin for World Dairy Expo next week to bring you Cowsmo on Cue. And make sure to check out those links in the show notes so you don't miss the live show ring coverage that will be provided next week during World Dairy Expo. And once again, just want to remind you about a couple of places where I hope we connect next week. One of those being the National Dairy Shrine's Young Professionals Career Luncheon on Monday from noon to 2 p.m. And this will feature a panel including 3 industry professionals, and it's really targeted towards those that are starting out their careers as well as finishing up their college journeys and helping them prepare for the world ahead. And on Thursday next week, you can join me in the Tanbark for a presentation sponsored by DeLaval, where we'll be talking to 2 dairymen, Matt Strickland from California and Jay Hegg from Wisconsin, as well as their nutritionists about a novel concept in robotic milking that is no feed through the VMS systems. So make sure you check that out while you're in Madison as well. So until next time, I'm Peggy Coffeen. Keep on growing, keep on learning, and up-leveling your dairy.